This is your Bias and Sources lesson for IS 201. We will look at why it is important to perceive where bias is occurring in a source. And every source has bias, how you will have to choose one of these sources, and then how you will use them while attempting to notice and mitigate your own biases. This lesson builds on the evaluation lesson from IS 101, where you learned the acronym PATS to assist you in identifying the credibility of a source. Bias is especially noticeable in the purpose and authority of a source. Take a moment to think about how you already notice bias in sources. Then think about how you notice bias and how you present information to the world, whether in class or in regular life. I'm sure you had some great ideas. See if they match up with the 4 categories I used to examine bias in sources. Word choice is the most fun and the most obvious. Notice what words you choose when you create information. Did you consciously choose something with a certain connotation? If you didn't do it on purpose, would you still purposely choose that now that you're thinking about it? Inclusion and omission of fact and fact placement can sometimes get lost because these days we might read only a social media post or a headline and get our information from there. But that makes the words those writers choose even more meaningful. Why did they choose that piece of information for a title? Why did they bury other information towards the end? When you create information, how do you decide what you put in and what you leave out? What kind of idea does that give your reader? Author and publication background is a bit more than simply whether either one is considered relevantly credible. Instead, ask, does the author or publication have a certain focus or reputation for supporting or detracting from a cause? And when you choose your resources, do you purposely make them inclusive and diverse? If all your resources are one type of demographic or for one type of demographic, your information will likely have some blind spots. Historical context is easy to forget about, but it definitely adds to your understanding of a source's biases. Even sources being published as you watch this video are published in a certain historical context. What are the social prejudices of the time? What are the cultural pressures? When you rely on sources in your own work, do you use them in a way that shows you understand the historical context? The goal isn't to excuse beliefs, but to be fully informed in what you use. As you discover more sources, you may notice that some sources have a particular focus or perspective, such as these examples here on the right. The Encyclopedia of African American Heritage is choosing to exclude content about other types of heritage. The Oxford Handbook of Dance on the popular screen is choosing to exclude dance that didn't happen in film, TV, or other video. That choice to include one perspective is not a bias per se. What's inside the book is certainly still fair game for analysis with word choice, other types of inclusion and omission, and so on. But the sole fact that the books chose one thing to focus on, and especially that those are ones that may have been previously overlooked, is not something that's part of the bias critique, except in unusual circumstances. Bias is everywhere. Neutrality is a myth. There are media bias charts you can find online. There are websites that purport to tell you whether a source is left or right-leaning, and it would be great if we could trust those assignations. The problems with those charts and labels are various, but I'll point out 2 of the main problems here. Every source has bias, and while some sources are definitely much more extreme than others, it's not useful to see a clump of sources here in the middle as if those are the ones that are somehow superhumanly able to avoid any bias. The other problem I'll point out now is that these charts often align publications with political beliefs. While a publication or author may lean a certain way, there are many other types of prejudices and biases you don't want to miss that come into play, often ones that are even across the board, not confined to a political belief.